This is from Maine with Love, an Allagash Brewing podcast where we talk all about beer, our community here in Maine, and things that generally make us happy. And what is making me personally happy right now is thinking about Hop Reach IPA, the topic of this conversation.
Yeah, today we talked with Jeff and Naomi about our upcoming release, Hop Reach. I felt like a great conversation. I feel like they have so many insights when it comes to what we're hoping the end result will be. So we heard a lot about the branding and why we're making an IPA. It was a fun conversation.
Super fun. We go through how we went from, hey, we're going to brew an IPA to, ta-da, we have a beer called Hop Reach IPA. And this is what the branding looks like, and this is how we're going to sell it. So it was really fun to relive this process. Liz and I both worked on Hop Reach as a beer from the marketing side, and then, with Jeff and with Naomi and with her entire team. And so I think it was inspiring for me how collaborative and inclusive the process was, both between marketing and sales, but also, folks from across the company.
Yeah. If that sounds interesting to you, give this episode a listen.
So joining me today, Liz Wilson.
Hello.
Hi, Liz.
Hey.
Naomi Neville, our sales director. Hi, Naomi.
Hello.
And Jeff Pillet-Shore, marketing director here at Allagash.
Hello.
Good to have everyone here. Now, I think my guess is that the both of you got wind of my secret questions, so I changed them. So you can't predict what we're going to ask. So we're going to start with Naomi.
Going off script.
Oh, you can't predict this stuff. So Naomi, I hear you're a fan of travel, and so the first question is a quick one: aisle seat or window?
Oh, always aisle, and it's got to be. Yeah, absolutely. And you got to be on like the left-hand side so you can put your right leg into the aisle. Wow. Very specific about where I get my seats.
What about the drink cart? Aren't you getting bumped?
Yeah, but it's worth it. It really is. I get to stretch one of my legs out. It's worth it.
Okay, that's good.
And closer to the drink cart too. So there's that benefit, right?
Of course.
That's fair.
I will add, as someone who firmly agrees with Naomi on this, you should seek a life partner who feels differently.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I mean, I'm a window seat person. I'm 100%.
Too.
I can't stand the aisle.
Me too. Ooh, what does that say about us? I don't know.
You know what? It says everything.
It should be a first date question for sure. Like aisle or window. It's like cats or dogs.
Yeah. That's true. That's important. So this is a slight follow-up, but what's the most relaxing destination you've ever been to? And it could just be maybe the trip itself was relaxing or whatever, but I'm interested.
That is a really great question. I think Costa Rica. That was, it hadn't been on a trip in a really long time, and it was just so relaxing. Everyone was so friendly. The weather was great. Did like an Airbnb so we could cook, and it was just really, really amazing.
That's awesome. Man, you nailed it. All right, Jeff, question for you. What's the podcast budget for 2023? No, that's a joke.
Depends on how today goes, Brett.
That's so true. Well, yeah. All right, now the pressure's on. No, the real question. So you can only pick a single sweet to enjoy for the next year. What is that sweet?
That actually was not a hard question for me. My wife's almond chocolate chip cookies. Just you got to go with what pops into your head first. A lot of different sweets out there,
but those don't seem to make it to the office too often.
Good point. It's actually interesting. We don't bake it as much as you might think, but I feel like under that, like, what is that sort of all-purpose sweet question? It's just got to be chocolate chip cookies.
I can see that.
This podcast always ends up at cookies, so I'm
100%.
That's fair. That's fair. And I feel called out. I feel like I need to raise my game and get those cookies in here. So I'll see what we can do.
I was going to say about Susie's cookies. We enjoyed them during the shoot for the Hop Reach commercial we just shot.
Amazing.
It all comes together.
Yeah, full circle.
Liz, do you want to take that first question? To
and kick us off here, yeah. So, we we finally decided that we'd be brewing a year-round IPA. When you heard this, what did you think?
I was excited. This is something that I've wanted to do for a very long time. I think a lot of us here like to drink hoppy beers. We certainly drink other people's hoppy beers. There was a gap in our portfolio that I felt like we could use a hoppy beer, really round it out nicely. It didn't take me long to get on board with this idea. Very excited.
Nice.
Yeah, what about you, Jeff?
Yeah, I think we all sort of came to the same conclusion almost independently. And I think we sort of shared with each other this idea that, hey, maybe now is the right time to do this. There was a sort of almost magical connection of realizing that we could do this. It could be delicious. We could have a blast doing it. We could be proud of it. It could really be an essentially Allagash take on an IPA. And I think it became very exciting and inspirational very, very quickly. It was fun.
Yeah, I think I remember when I heard it, I was just kind of like, I got super excited because I just know with our brewers and like the brewing talent we have here that it was just like, ooh, I cannot wait to see what they, unleash them on this like entire category of beer of like brew exactly what you want to drink. I was just like, oh, this is going to be really good. And spoiler alert, it is really good. I really like it. But yeah, I guess, the kind of natural follow-up question is like, okay, so we made the decision. Why? Why are we brewing an IPA?
Because we really wanted to brew an IPA. So
that's it.
Wholesalers have been asking us for one for years. It's probably the most asked about beer when people come into our tasting room. I think our tasting room team is pretty tired of having to answer with not quite, but we do have this beer that's kind of hoppy. So like everybody coming through wants to know what we have for an IPA. And we really enjoy them, like I mentioned earlier. And it's just such a massive part of the craft beer market. It's like almost 50%, if you can believe that. I think it's like 45% of craft beer is in that sort of overarching IPA category. So it's this big piece of the craft beer business that we really weren't playing in. So it's pretty exciting all around for us.
It's cool.
Yeah, I feel like we see it every once in a while in reviews. It's like, we had a great time, but they don't have any IPAs. And we're like, shooters. So I think we all were pretty excited when we decided we were going to do it.
Yeah, we're in an IPA territory with no IPA right now. People come to Maine, come to New England, they expect you to have an IPA. So soon we'll have, our version of an IPA.
Totally. And even when we did put an IPA on tap, we had For Made with Love number 19. Can we say the spoiler of that beer? Can we kind of do the little insight? So peek behind the curtain. For Made with Love 19 was actually a test batch of Hop Reach to see how the sort of recipe that we created on a smaller system would work when brewed on a larger system. So our way of kind of trying that out and seeing how it tastes and also enjoying it ourselves was to put it out as a For Made with Love beer. So if you had For Made with Love 19, you have had very nearly what Hop Reach IPA will be tasting like. And anyway, so when we put For Made with Love 19 on tap at the brewery only, I saw a person say they need more IPAs. So it's just like when we put one on, we should have put more on. So hey,
right.
Proof of concept.
Yeah, and it's selling really well. A lot of good feedback on the For Made with Love 19.
That's awesome.
I think also there might have been a time when we felt that we needed to not have an IPA, that we needed to show that we were coming from a different place. We needed to reflect our values as a brewery through showing a very different beer list. And we've reached a time where I think we really feel comfortable with the idea that we can be Allagash, we can be what we stand for, we can be what we need to be for the community and our employees, and we can also brew a pretty darn delicious IPA at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's a good call, Jeff. And we've said it a few times, but I think it's worth mentioning again. Not our first IPA, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Correct. Very far from it, actually. I think before I even joined Allagash, which is over 13 years now, Hum alone was out in the market. I can remember in my previous career, someone bringing in a bottle of Hum alone and we all shared it. And that was definitely before I worked here. So I got to think that was that's quite a while ago. Then we've done other IPA iterations over the years. A few of our From Maine with Loves. We do some hot pilot beers in the tasting room. That's sort of tasting room only. So definitely not our first foray into this kind of category.
Let us step all the way back from talking about Hop Reach. But do Allagash fans, the people who enjoy our beer currently, do they want an IPA? Is this something for them?
I'm glad you asked that, Brett.
You're welcome, Jeff. Wasn't prompted.
We've talked a lot about this as the release was coming up, and I think there's a story that Zach, our quality manager, has told a bunch of times, which is when he's going out with his family or his own, he's going to get 2 beers, and the first beer is going to be an Allagash White, and the second beer is going to be an IPA. And there's so many folks internally at the brewery for whom that resonates, that they absolutely love Allagash White, and they also love IPAs. And so to a certain extent, that's great. That's us. But can we trust ourselves? Are we really the entirety of the beer drinking population? Obviously not. But what we've been able to confirm is that the Allagash drinker drinks IPAs. They are an IPA drinker. And there are certainly many, many people who love Allagash White, and they love Belgian style wheat beers, and they love our beer. And that is the beer that they enjoy. And they don't really have a lot of interest in exploring IPAs. That's awesome. And there's a lot of folks who are like that. But there are as many, if not more, folks who drink IPAs, and they drink a lot of IPAs. They actually, over half of our drinkers drink an IPA every week. And overall, Allagash drinkers drink as much IPA as they do Allagash White. So we're a big part of what they enjoy, but there's so many other things that people are enjoying as well. So we are excited by getting to have an IPA that we think reflects a lot of the things that they enjoy about Allagash White, in the sense that it's balanced, that it's approachable, that it's inclusive, that it really is a beer that's there for them day in, day out. And now, obviously, it's a very different beer. It's extremely hoppy. It's a straight up IPA, but it also reflects the other things that they're already enjoying about Allagash White. So it's fun getting to be able to play in that space and offer something to that drinker, because it means that we get to be who we are. We don't have to, change up our attire, so to speak. We get to be ourselves and show up for that drinker. And our hope is that they welcome us into that space.
So I guess let's jump to kind of so we heard we're going to make an IPA. Then I guess for both of you, like Naomi and Jeff, like where do we start? Like you hear that, and then where do we go from there, from a branding and sort of sales perspective?
I don't know if this sounds cheesy, but we started with the beer. I think, you all are in the marketing team, but you can't brand the beer without kind of knowing what the beer is going to be, the taste profiles. If you don't want to brand it in an extreme way when it's going to be very soft on the palate, and vice versa. You want to like nail the feel of the beer. So we definitely started with the beer. We started with what we wanted to be drinking and what we thought other people would enjoy drinking, and did it in a very Allagash sort of way.
Yeah, I think understanding what we wanted the drinker to take away from the beer, what we wanted them to feel and experience, when and how we pictured them consuming it and enjoying it and drinking it. All of that really served as, the opening direction for all aspects of this beer, what it was going to taste like, what it was going to look like, what the entire experience would be for that drinker and that person who chose this beer.
Yeah, and I guess what do we mean by the Allagash way? Like what are some of those things that make it Allagash?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we started thinking about this beer, we in a lot of ways wanted to make the Allagash White of IPAs. And we meant that, in some senses in a very practical way, right? We wanted it to sit, and we knew that it would sit on the shelf, in your favorite store next to Allagash White. So it had to feel part of a whole. It had to feel part of that family. But on an even deeper, more fundamental level, we wanted an approachable, inclusive beer that you would be proud to drink, whether you were new to IPAs or knew all there was to IPAs, something that would be as, familiar to you on day one as it would be to you on, year 10, and that it would be something that you would enjoy coming back to time and time again and discover new flavors and new experiences all the time. It's a pretty high bar that we set for ourselves, but that idea of really just being inclusive and approachable and welcoming to people, something that you could drink, a couple times a week if you so chose. All of those things were qualities that we wanted, that we love about Allagash White, and that we wanted our Allagash IPA to be able to have, from the beer inside to the branding on the outside.
Yeah, that's what Rob always says about Allagash White, right? He's been drinking it every day for over 25 years, and he still finds new things to enjoy in it every time.
Totally.
Yeah, and I think, that's a hugely exciting task for our brewers. And, in some of the other podcasts we'll do on this series, we'll get more into detail as to how we actually came up with the liquid that will be in this can. So if you haven't heard those, be sure to tune in to the episodes with our brewers.
Yes. Very, very cool on how that all worked. And I feel like there was kind of a similar iteration process that went with the brewing of the beer and also went with the branding of the beer. Like with how we work it wasn't like we kind of like came up with one idea and we're like, that's good. I think there were more ideas for this single beer than for any beer we've ever worked on. And so, yeah, I mean, I think thinking of that branding and thinking, I guess, for where we landed. Prior to that, Naomi, what was there anything that you were hoping for in the branding of the beer? So we knew where we were going with the liquid itself, with the beer. We knew that the flavor profile was going to be somewhere in the realm of citrusy, tropical, and maybe a little bit of pine. I think that's what our brewers were shooting for. So once we kind of knew this, we knew the ABV of this, the shooting for 6.8% ABV. What then, I guess, Naomi, were you kind of hoping for when you thought of the end result of branded beer?
So I think I was hoping for something that really resembled the beer in the can. So like you just said, so citrusy, tropical, but also balanced. Just because this is a podcast and because you can't see what it looks like right now. It's a beautiful cream colored can, and there are hop vines wrapping around it. And the buds on the hop vines are green, and the leaves are just different tropical colors, and it's just very balanced, sort of a light looking can, definitely not an extreme looking can. So it really represents the beer in the can perfectly. Honestly, it's welcoming. It has this accessible look, and because there are so many hotbeds on the can, you really get the feeling that what is going to be in there is going to be hoppy, which is very much what I wanted to express with that. And then just I think Jeff has said it before, but sort of this classic, timeless look that can sit next to Allagash White and won't age or get old quickly.
Totally. Jeff, same question for you.
Oh my God. I mean, I think Naomi just nailed it. I mean, how awesome is that I get to listen to my counterpart in sales just describe the brand so beautifully. And I think that is a reflection of what made this entire process so fun, was how inclusive we were with each other. But in terms of what the target was, absolutely. We wanted something that was classic, timeless, and I think critically made it as easy as possible on the person picking this beer up off the shelf to know what they were going to get. We know intuitively, we know from experience, we know from listening to consumers that the act of shopping for a beer is oddly stressful. People worry about what it's going to taste like. They worry whether or not it's going to meet their expectations, if they're going to be stuck with it in their fridge, if they don't like it. That's a big deal for folks. And I think it's easy to forget that a little bit because we've worked inside the beer business, all of us, for at least a few years, if not a lot longer. But, I think for so many folks, that act of choosing a beer opens a lot of questions. And so a lot of our goal in designing this beer is to just help relax people and help them understand that they're going to get something that is what they expect and that they're going to enjoy. And so all of the aspects that Naomi describes were intentionally and thoughtfully selected to be able to convey what the beer actually tastes like, so that people would go into it with the best chance of knowing that they were picking a beer that they would enjoy.
Yeah, that the cream background too, I feel like is one of the biggest things that I think changed for me. Was we had thought about it initially, had a bunch of different options that had a cream background. We ended up kind of semi going with the background that was a little bit darker, really cool, deep blue background. But then ultimately, like kind of towards the very end of the process, we were like, let's switch it back. Let's switch. That cream is so much more approachable. And when we made that mental shift at the end, I remember just being like internally very excited, being like, yes, this was the right, like, as excited as I've ever been over a color change. it was cool to make that mental shift. And I just feel like it makes the entire beer so much more approachable.
Yeah. I think back on some of the other, we had many different options for where this brand could go. And when I think of being at shelf, like Jeff was mentioning, and looking at a sea of beer, I think we really got to a good place to quickly communicate to drinkers like what the heck they're going to have. And so I hope that we find that that's true. So, yeah. And I guess, naming a beer is I don't even know how to describe the process of naming.
It's the simplest. Yeah, it's the easiest thing we do.
A special kind of hell. Can I say that? I don't know. It's a challenge to name a beer, and I think we debated a lot. Why don't we just call it Allagash IPA, or do we give it a name? So I think Naomi or Jeff, do you want to talk a little bit about the exploration around the name of this beer?
Yeah, I can start off. I think the exploration of the name was also part of a whole in terms of the exploration of the creative identity of the beer as well. And we really went into it with that as an open question. We didn't rule that out. We were very curious about the idea that maybe Allagash IPA worked perfectly. Right? It's the perfect counterpart to Allagash White, which is a style. There's tons of successful IPAs on the market that are just simply brand name IPA. So that could totally work. And so what we knew that we needed to do with the name and all of the creative identity was we needed to really open ourselves up. We know our brand, we know our consumer, we know our visuals, but we also were humble about the fact that the IPA segment is potentially at least a different mindset from other beers, and we wanted to go in approaching that in a curious way. And so we allowed ourselves to explore the widest range of possible directions, both in terms of naming and in terms of visual identity. So things that were more experiential and moment-based, things that were purely stylistic, things that were not purely stylistic, but also more focused on giving you a sense as to what the beer itself actually was. And that allowed us a ton of creative freedom, rather than it being a process that was sort of decided by debate or, or, outlasting the other person. It really became a process of let's just get as many great ideas out there, follow them and see where they go. And then let's get the voice of the consumer in there. Let's, do some really thoughtful testing to see how these different ideas actually hold up in context. And then that is going to allow us to reflect on what we think is right for our brand. Just really allowed us to stay humble and stay curious. And out of that is what came, actually, no, the drinker didn't prefer this as Allagash IPA. And we thought, okay, that's really interesting. What resonated for them, however, was this direction that Naomi described, which is don't tell me it's an IPA, show me it's an IPA. And we think it comes across really nicely through the hops, the use of the word hop, the color, et cetera, everything that Naomi has already beautifully and better described than I can. It hopefully it does that work of showing itself as an IPA rather than just telling you loudly.
Yeah, and there's some other little touches in there. There's some leaves on there, and the color of those leaves are kind of like a lighter blue and an orange. And I've always viewed that for me as like that's kind of the tropical notes. Who wants to talk about the name?
I think we have an expert who can talk best about the name on the call. Brett, would you like to tell us more about the origination of the name and where it came from, and what inspired the team to come up with that name?
I would love to. Thank you. So I was a part of the team that came up with the branding for this beer and the name. I honestly don't know where any of the names came from at this point. Like I can't pin anyone to any particular name.
Heaven.
So they came from heaven. Yes, they came. They were a gift from the muse. But so with Hop Reach, the thing that we ended up coming to was just that, like, Hop Reach is just kind of has an interesting sound. It rolls off the tongue. It's a really kind of just nice name to say. There's the actual sort of in the description of the beer, we thought about, the hop vines reaching for the sun and they're going up and filling with citrusy and tropical flavor. And so there's that sort of evoking the flavor of the beer in there with the imagery that we kind of talked about. There's also the fact that, there's the alternative meaning of reach, where we have brewers and we have people within the brewery who like to reach for IPAs. So that was a fun little play on the words and stuff. And it's something we figured out after the fact that I figured out right before we were going to talk to the press about this. But it was just like we were talking about. I was looking at all of our labels, and I'll normally do a lot of kind of like geographic, like, vistas or something on our beers. This one's more focused in on the hops. So it's not different, but at the same time, a reach is also, if you look up the definition, one of its many definitions is actually like a stretch of river, a straight expanse of stream. So that worked very nicely because we have a lot of streams and rivers and stuff on our labels. So Hop Reach ended up being just kind of really cool from a lot of different directions.
Works on a lot of levels.
Tastes good too. Mm-hmm. So I mean, for the beer, like, I guess, we talked about sort of its profile of citrusy, tropical, sort of balanced 6.8%, like, is it super hazy? And if it's not super hazy, why isn't it super hazy? I don't know. Like, what's the thought there?
Yeah, it is definitely not super hazy. I think we're kind of dialing in the haze right now, but it couldn't be described as like a New England hazy IPA. Right. Very much not that. And why isn't it? Like, those beers are brewed with, specific ingredients to create haze, specific processes, and they give you specific taste and flavor and aroma profiles. And the beer that we created and that we wanted to create just didn't fit with that. So, we know they're super popular. We enjoy drinking them from other people too. It was just, we were going for something different with our IPA. So, we're excited to do sort of a more, it's a classic take on the IPA. Sure. So it's definitely a hazy is, definitely a growing segment. Some of those imperial IPAs are definitely a growing segment. There is a lot of growth on sort of like the margins of the IPA category, but where we're playing right now, we're in that middle space of the IPA where it's about 3 times the size of the hazy IPA category. And the ABV we're aiming for is like the majority of ABVs out there. So it's like, I don't know, it sounds really boring to say it's like right in the middle, but it's an enjoyable middle ground, yes. I guess. It's something you could have a couple of. It's not going to wreck your palate. It's, something you can just go back and have another and relax with friends, and come back to and revisit it multiple times a week.
Yeah. Naomi, did you get, as we were starting this process of brewing the IPA, what sort of feedback did you get from the sales team? I feel they're out in the field, they're talking to partners every day. I'm sure they're, just as much as our tasting room folks, getting asked for IPAs from our partners, from drinkers. What was some of the initial feedback that you got from the team?
To start with, they were incredibly excited that we were thinking of brewing an IPA and that it was going to be a national release and a year-round beer. I mean, that's pretty big for us. We don't release a lot of year-round beers. Yeah. We don't switch things up that much. So that was a pretty exciting thing for them. And then they were actually able to be involved in the feedback, which was really awesome. And, a huge shout out to our QC team, Matthew Davis and Carl, for allowing them to be part of that feedback. So they actually got to try the From Aim with Love number 19 samples that were shipped to them. And then they remotely, in 19 states and DC, filled out their evaluation form. And that was, another part of how we evaluated this beer and tweaked it and changed it up. So being able to be a part of it, I think, is so exciting. I mean, it's such an engaged sales team that they really want to be able to give feedback and say how they feel about it. So I was so happy we were able to do that.
That's great. And I mean, I feel like we kind of experienced that as well, where as we were coming up with the branding of this beer, we were also tasting all the different versions that the pilot team was putting out there. So I feel like it was this cool back and forth of ideas that were popping up. So it was fun.
really was. And some of the pilot team and the brewers were in some of the branding
right.
meetings. And it was really unique.
Yeah, I think this was, we commented on how this was sort of the most extensive, most inclusive process that we've ever gone through, and certainly that we as an organization have ever undertaken. On a personal level, it was so extraordinary to be involved with so many different people across the brewery and bring in so many different perspectives early on. And so, we were able, as non-brewers on this podcast, we were able to offer our inputs to people who are extraordinary expert brewers, and they really cared what we had to say. And my hope is that we were able to create similar experiences for people who are non-marketers, but really offered some extraordinary insights that ended up steering the direction that we went in. From the earliest meetings that we had talking about this beer, we had members of the same brewing team that were brewing and developing the beer. They were looking at our early creative concepts, and it was an extraordinary learning process for us as an organization, because, in the early beer pilots, Patrick, who's just an amazing brewer, would bring in these 4 beers and he'd say, okay, so ignore the alcohol level on this one and ignore the haze level on this one. And actually this one might be, and he'd go on through all these things that you needed to sort of not pay attention to. And then you would ask this extraordinary question to give feedback. And, I felt a little tongue tied about that. And then we would flip it around and we would have these early creative meetings where we would show like 24 different concepts. And we'd say, okay, ignore the colors, ignore the font. We would actually draw this differently. It's not going to look anything like this, but other than that, what do you think? And then we would sort of watch the reaction on their faces. And, but all of that included, we got great insights from them on what branding really resonated for them, on what they felt that this beer was going to feel like. And so even though we were doing this in parallel, I think the reason that we were able to end up with a brand that did feel so similar to the beer inside is because we had, Corey and Zach and Patrick and Jason in those early meetings from the beginning. And then that we were able to get Carrie and Susie and other people outside of the room from the sales team and so on, tasting the beer and also looking at the brand at the same time.
Awesome.
Yeah, I feel like you just recapped a year in like 2 minutes.
Yeah, it was super easy. There were definitely no curveballs in there.
Simple.
Yeah,
no crying.
Smooth sailing.
It was just seamless. Yeah, I mean, I'd wonder. I feel like it'd be fun to actually go back and look at literally how many versions of this label Todd created. It'd probably be in like the 50s, if not the 100s.
It was close. It depends on what you count as a version, because I did some of that counting before our June meeting. But it was astonishing because, there were dozens, if not 100+ names. And then there were these different brand families that were all considered. And then under the brand families, there were dozens of different alternates for that. So collectively, it's certainly north of 100 different variations that we considered. And it was exciting because oftentimes the thing wasn't the thing or even the thing that it led to, but it was the thing that thing led to that ended up really unlocking something awesome.
Yeah, and there's also a lot of fruitful effort in there, like additionally, because it's all these ideas we now have in our roster to say like, oh, well, maybe we have a new beer coming out. Oh, remember that idea that wasn't perfect for Hop Reach. Boom, there you go. That's perfect for that beer. Amazing.
Yeah, that really raises a great question, which is, so does this mean this is the best possible brand? And the way that we think about it is it's the right brand for this beer and for this release. The other brands that we didn't use for this are amazing. Like, folks really, really enjoyed them internally, not just on the marketing team. There was some really cool stuff that came out of it, but it didn't meet those needs that we described from the beginning. It wasn't as accessible, it wasn't as inclusive, and it certainly didn't tell you right off the bat what to expect out of this beer.
Yeah, I can't wait to start getting feedback from people on it, but we'll see.
We'll see.
So do you think people will offer their unsolicited feedback online, Liz? I'm not sure.
Nah.
Never.
People don't do that. No. People don't really like to put out their opinions.
They're very shy.
There.
We need to encourage them. Yeah.
We want the feedback, though.
We do want the feedback. And we appreciate the feedback, too. We don't want to be too coy about it. It's actually really helpful when people tell us exactly what they think on our social media platforms, because then we can take that and say, well, I didn't. I wasn't expecting that, or factor into future decisions. So raise your voice.
Yeah, we read them all.
Use your voice as power. We do. We literally do. We read all of them.
Yep.
So nitty gritty, Naomi, how did we decide on the packages then, on the sizes? What was this going to go into? Cans versus bottles versus draft? Where do we land?
Yeah, we're going to be doing 3 different types of can packages and drafts. So we're going to do 12-ounce 12 packs, 12-ounce 6-pack of cans, and also 16-ounce 4-pack of cans. I always get all that mixed up, but that's what we're doing. We chose cans. I mean, you probably all know anecdotally when you look at a shelf set that the majority of IPAs are in cans and not bottles. I just looked at it last week. It's 77% of the IPAs are in cans, not bottles. So definitely the preferred pack size for drinkers out there. So that's why we pick cans, and then, the most popular pack sizes, and then draft. We do think, that this will be a great draft beer in addition to a white beer on tap. So pretty excited by that.
Also a 750 milliliter cork and cage, but
not 375, Jeff.
Edit button.
I do. This is obviously not for the podcast, but I can still recall being in the room when we were discussing whether or not you, Malone, could go from being in a 750 to a 4-pack of bottles. It was not a comfortable switch. It was not an obvious change. It was like, are we sure?
No.
Sorry, Liz, I stepped on my...
Yeah. No, I was going to say, when can people expect to find this in stores near them?
Oh my gosh, drum roll, please. Jeff, can you hit the filing cabinet below your foot there so we could get like this?
There we go.
There we go. I love it. Yeah.
I think someone's going to check.
All right. So coming soon to a retailer near you. No, we are going to launch this beer at the start of next year. A lot of people might be like, why are you going to launch something in January? Dry January is a thing. Nobody's drinking. Everybody's done from the holidays. But a lot of big sort of chain retail supermarkets, they reset their shelves in the spring. So they kind of look at what's performing well, what's underperforming, and they put in, their best new shelf set in the spring. So that happens anywhere. So it's sort of late January through to March. So it'll be kind of like on a rolling basis that you'll see it rolled out to an area near you. Just want to put a big plug in for our beer finder on our website. So if you are curious, please go there, type in your zip code, look for IPA, and you'll be able to see it there better than anywhere else. So always encourage people to call ahead, or if you don't see it somewhere, ask someone to bring it in for you. We like to hear what you are all thinking. Retail stores like to hear what their customers want. So feel free to ask for it.
Yes. And Naomi is referring to our website, allagash.com/locator. You're very welcome.
Thanks,
There it is. Wait, I want to see if that actually, sorry. You can also do beer-finder. I want to make sure locator works.
Make it work, Brett. Make it work. It sounds good.
Oh, I'm sure it does. Yeah. I'm going to go on the back end. I'm going to go into Hacker Typer and just start. So you can do beer-finder or locator, or you could just go to our homepage, and the very second thing on our homepage, if you scroll down, is a link to that beer finder. So we put it in many places.
Very useful tool.
Yes.
Yeah, and we'll be releasing it in the tasting room as well, and we'll announce all those fun dates as we get a little bit closer. So it's going to be an exciting start to the year.
It really is.
Really looking forward to it.
Something to look forward to in January, right? As the holidays are over, you're like, oh,
yes,
it's cold in Maine.
We tend to need that.
You just want to reach for something.
Exactly. Right. What do you want to reach for, Jeff?
I would like to reach for one today.
Oh, how's everyone feel? Do you feel like we covered everything you were hoping to talk about?
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
Awesome.
And I get to keep this,
thank you,
right?
thank
I
you
just
both for
want to
coming.
clarify. It's amazing.
Keep the mic.
Yeah, these are lovely.
It's pretty
I want to
amazing.
keep the headphones if that's okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye.
This has been an Allagash Brewing production. If you have something you want us to talk about on the show, shoot us a message at podcast@allagash.com. And as always, thanks for listening.